Tonight I'm going to talk about the word hope. I think hope is one of the most misunderstood words in our vocabulary. Sometimes we think hope is sitting in the corner and wishing that things will be better when we get out of that corner. I think about growing up in this church, and I remember many times sitting in these pews praying that God would do my homework for me. That prayer was perpetually left unanswered. Hope, we think, is a passive thing, like a wish. But hope is not the passive wishing for things to be better. Hope is the conviction that what we do each and every day actually makes things better. Hope is not sitting back. Hope is about leaning in. I imagine you all have a favorite movie, one that you've probably watched 300 times, and it always ends the same. One of mine is The Shawshank Redemption. I love that movie. It's a movie about hope. Produced in 1994, it's portrayed with the character Andy Dufresne, who said that hope is maybe the best of things. But he's encountered with Red Redding, played by Morgan Freeman, who says that hope is a dangerous thing. Is hope a good thing, or is hope a dangerous thing? These two very divergent conclusions that are drawn from their diverse identities and experiences, it brings to light the importance of reflection on the comfort and the challenges associated with hope. Red's character, on the one hand, is that if you don't hope for anything, then you won't get disappointed. It's kind of like don't set any goals, because then you won't fail to meet them. Andy Dufresne's character, on the other hand, I would argue is a prisoner of hope. Despite all that's going on in his life, despite his unjust imprisonment, despite being incarcerated for over 20 years, Andy Dufresne, morning after morning, day after day, night after night, refuses to succumb to despair. Literally one handful of his jail cell at a time, he dispenses that which has incarcerated him. And for those of you that have seen the movie, you know that part of the end where Red and Andy reunite on the beach, in the sunshine. We're realizing they are no longer prisoners of Shawshank, but they are prisoners of hope. Perhaps the movie tells us something, that hope is not about dreaming for a better world, but hope is about choosing to create your better world. It's not about stepping back, it's about leaning in. It's not about being a thermostat, it's about being a thermometer. It's about choosing to look in the mirror before we look out the window. For it recognizes that it takes more courage to look in the mirror than it does to look out the window. Perhaps the movie and perhaps our scriptures remind us that hope is a good thing. And despite the storms of life, despite all the things that incarcerate us in our minds and in our bodies, we have hope, and that hope persists. The 5th chapter of Romans tells us that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint. So if hope is meant to break through the chains that incarcerate us, the question for each of us today is, what is it that incarcerates us? What are the chains, either visible or invisible, that we hold? Perhaps you're imprisoned by indifference, or you're incarcerated by your own insecurity. Perhaps you're confined by anger or resentment. Perhaps you're locked up because of ignorance or detained because of denial. Perhaps some of us are serving lifetime sentences of our own making, of our minds. Tonight we wonder, what would it mean to break free of those chains and to live as people of hope, and to hear the words of Scripture that suffering does produce endurance, endurance does produce character, and character does produce hope, and hope does not disappoint us. What would happen if we gripped onto that promise that instead of complaining and instead of thinking everyone else was the problem, what if we were able to look within and to see that we are the authors of our story, that we are the pilots of our existence, the captains of the ship, and that we co-create with God, because hope is a good thing. Hope is a good thing, and hope does not disappoint us. The Scriptures remind us that our hope is with us because God does not leave us. That no matter where we are, no matter where we find ourselves, God is with us. This is the core of the gospel, that we are not forsaken, we are not departed, we are not forgotten. Despite being in a world that is packed with pain, despite being faced with feelings and thoughts with fear, we are prisoners of hope because Christ is with us. Despite all the times we're on the receiving end of lies, despite all the times we're tempted to tear others down, despite all the times that we forget the good others have done and others have forgot the good you have done, we are prisoners of hope because Christ is with us. Despite the anger that often surrounds us, or the confusion that stirs us, the ignorance that hurts us, the betrayal that bounds us, despite the praise or critique we give or receive that impacts others and us, may we be prisoners of hope because Christ is with us, and that hope does not disappoint.